Hi, this is Will Tonner here, sound designer and audio programmer for Lamp8 Audio, and I'm here to kick off a series of videos covering Wwise as the audio engine powering a Unity project. So in this series we'll be covering a number of key game audio mechanics, an example of these mechanics in action, but just give you a bit of background behind the project and what we'll be looking at over the next few videos. I've used a number of tutorials and I've been able to sort of roughly piece together what I'm about to show you from a Unity integration point of view, from a number of different sources. I've never managed to find a definitive source that ties all the many different fundamental areas of Wwise and game audio together. So what I've done is I've devised a project, I've created a project with the idea of creating a video series on some of the areas of the project that I've covered, with two key differences in that project. So the first key difference is I want to show Wwise in the context of a custom Unity project, make it a little bit easier to visualize some of the elements and the mechanics that we're creating in Wwise and show what they look like in an actual game environment. There's quite a few demonstrations and portfolio pieces showing Cube, the popular first-person shooter that runs off an open source engine that works with Wwise, and people have put together general sort of sandbox ideas of how Wwise works. But I thought the best thing to do was maybe build a game or really just a portfolio piece together from the ground up to actually show what it looks like in a totally unique environment, and how the integration works from very much from an API point of view in terms of getting the two bits of software to talk to each other, Unity and Wwise. So that'll make itself a lot clearer when we actually go through the tutorial. We'll go into very minute detail about exactly what is being sent back to Wwise, what variables are being used, how we're affecting the sounds, and vice versa from Wwise back to Unity as well. The second key difference is that rather than just using the drag and drop functionality within Wwise integration, the toolbox, the picker that comes with the integration in the form of a window, we're actually going to be looking at creating custom C code, C# code, to allow for greater flexibility beyond what is within those predefined scripts. And again, that'll be a lot clearer when we go into the individual mechanics too. There are certain areas and certain things that I wanted to achieve within the game, and that I wanted Wwise to register that I couldn't achieve with just the predefined scripts. So it involved a little bit of using the API itself and writing code, which seemed a little bit scary at first. I'm very much a sound designer first and a programmer second, so it was quite a big task to get my head around. But ultimately, there's a few key variables and key commands and strings that you use over and over again. So we'll go into detail on that, and hopefully it'll be second nature by the end of the video series. So the format of the videos themselves will be an introduction to the concept we're talking about in that specific video. I'll show the initial setup in Wwise and how we get that generated as a sound bank, and then I'll follow that up with the usage and the creation within Unity, followed up by the actual pushing of any relevant parameters or variables back into Wwise to see how that looks, and we can see what the finished article looks like as well. So the project itself will be available as a standalone build that I'll allow you guys to download. I'll put a link up on the video. Also, if you wanted to look at the initial portfolio video that I have put up on my channel, that actually shows what that demo looks like and some of the main mechanics that we'll be looking at over the course of the series. So check that out as well. Just from a housekeeping point of view, I'm using a Mac on OS X 10.11, so it's the new El Capitan version. If you haven't already upgraded, I'd advise you to hold off. I've had quite a few troubles, specifically around audio devices, around a Fast Track Pro sound card I use that's been a bit of a pain to get up and running, but I have done eventually. But if you're following this at home on a Mac, try and stay on Yosemite or Mavericks or something earlier than that. So in this video, I'm going to be covering the initial setup of Wwise and Unity, and how we get the two separate applications integrated and talking to each other. So I mentioned we would normally be looking at Wwise and then Unity. This video is a bit of an exception. We're going to start with Unity first and get it set up with all the right packages installed, and then show how the Wwise project fits within that, and how we make changes to the Wwise project, which ultimately push back into Unity and update from there. So let's go right to it. So first off, let's look at setting Unity up with the Wwise integration package. I'm using the version 2015.1.4 for Mac. If we jump over to the actual Audiokinetic website itself, if you head on over to download, and then within all the integration options under Unity integration, select the latest version for you and hit go. Scroll down here, you'll see all the different individual deployments you've got for individual platforms. So go ahead and select the one that's relevant to you. So you can see that now we're on 2015.1.6. I've been absolutely fine with .4. I haven't noticed any bugs or any issues that have caused me to upgrade. So I've gone ahead and just used that. So go ahead and download the one that's most relevant to you, and you'll end up with an individual package file like this. So I'm going to go ahead and open Unity. What you'll need to do is go ahead and create a new project. I'm just going to go ahead and create that on the desktop. Then what you want to do is click on Assets, Import Package, Custom Package, browse to the Unity integration file, and open that up. What it will do is it'll build a folder structure and ask what elements you want to import. By default, everything's ticked, and that's what you're going to want to go ahead and do. Let's click Import. And once all the scripts are compiled and the integration is finished, you'll come up with this dialog box, which gives you a bit of an introduction to the integration package itself. And then it will ask you whether you want to point the Unity project towards the Wwise project. Now, typically, you're going to want to put the Wwise project within the folder structure for Unity. In this case, because we're just doing it as a blank package, we don't have a Wwise project that we can point to. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to cancel this and come out of it. I'm going to quit Unity. And what we're going to do instead is reference the Wwise demo scene package. So if we go back over onto the Audiokinetic website, when you select Unity integration, you'll have a couple more options underneath all these platforms, and I think this is a little bit hidden away, so I'm definitely going to highlight this to you guys because I think it's a really great resource. This here, the Wwise Unity 5 demo scene, download this package. In this case, I've got it over here on the desktop. I'm going to go ahead back into Unity again and create a new project, new Unity project 1. I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to go Assets, Import Package, Custom Package. This time around, I'm going to point towards the demo scene Unity package. Go ahead and open that. And again, Unity is going to give us a breakdown of all the individual files that are contained within that file package and the folder structure for it. You probably notice immediately there's a lot more to it. And that's because we're not only importing the Wwise side of things. So here's all the .cs, which is the individual scripts themselves. All of them have AK as a precursor. That's how you know it's an Audiokinetic script. But it's also importing quite a few packages and models, prefabs. We've got options here. You can see immediately we've got an FPS input controller, a third-person camera. So with all these ticked, go ahead and hit import. And once that's done, you'll have something a little bit like this. So straight away, you'll notice on the right-hand side, this is your game object hierarchy. Your layout might be a little bit different to mine. I've customized mine to suit my needs. But ultimately, in the hierarchy list, you'll have all of the individual game objects that Audiokinetic have created for this this demo scene. If we jump over to projects, you'll see within the folder structure itself that we've recreated it like for like, exactly as it was shown to us when we imported that package. But the key area that Wwise integration introduces into the typical Unity workflow is this Wwise picker element here, which allows us to in this case we have pointed this Unity project towards a Wwise project, so it allows us to actually reference within the Wwise project itself, and we can start to see individual elements such as the events, some of the switches. We can drag things like states, banks, auxiliary buses. We can drag these directly onto game objects and directly onto scripts to quickly assign properties to the scripts. So if we have a look at something like our third person controller, for example, I'll scroll down a little bit. It's a first person controller is a standard asset that comes within the standard assets package for Unity. So a lot of this you'll see by default. But what you wouldn't see within the typical standard assets are these ones right here at the bottom. You've got a custom script called Footsteps that Audiokinetic have written, and you've also got a couple of pre-made scripts, and you can tell they're pre-made because they've got the AK prefix of bank, which loads the sound bank up, and AK game object, which registers the game object itself too. So what the Wwise integrations allowed us to do is, rather than mess around in the back end and write direct bits of code in C to the API, we can actually click on something like bank name, and because we're referencing the Wwise project directly, we have a list of all the banks that we can choose. So we could switch over to environments, for example. When I click that, and straight away that's made the changes in the back end to then load the environment sound bank rather than the Footsteps one. But where the pre-built scripts aren't flexible enough to achieve the desired outcome, that's where we, in these videos that I'll show you, are going to use C to directly reference the Wwise SDK ourselves. And as I say, it might seem scary at first. It's essentially just a handful of key functions that we'll revisit time and time again, and they'll soon become second nature. So what I've gone ahead and done is loaded up a completely separate project that's been built from the ground up. Well, actually, I've used the Wwise demo scene as the basis for what I've got here. But you probably recognise it's fairly similar looking, but it's a totally different environment. And I built this one from scratch to showcase a few mechanics that aren't within the Wwise demo scene, and they're the areas that we'll be covering over the next few videos. I recommend, if you do want to do your own sort of demonstration platform yourself, then I would certainly use the Wwise demo scene as your backbone for that, and build on top of it as I have. So there's quite a few new game objects and components here that aren't within the Wwise demo scene. I've grouped it all up, so we've got one for player, one for vehicles, and then anything that acts as a trigger, always very specifically there just to influence the audio or the sound in some way. I've grouped under the Wwise objects section. Last thing I'm going to do in terms of talking about Unity from an integration point of view is just mention a bit of a warning in terms of the way that Unity deals with compilation of scripts. So I'm using the standard assets package, and most people out there will be if they're putting some sort of demonstration together. So if I go into the root level assets folder, I've got a number of different folders, and we've got one here for standard assets. Now, most of your typical standard assets will be imported here by default. So when you go to assets, import package, and use any one of these ones here, they're going to be automatically put in the standard assets folder. Now, if you are going to use standard assets and you are going to dive into the scripts for each of the standard assets and the prefabrications of those, and make changes to them and make references to the Wwise API within there, you need to make sure you move that standard asset out of the default folder and up into the root level. So I've been using the third person character, which should be here. I've moved that up and I've put it here instead at the root level. The reason for that is that the standard assets folder is compiled before the Wwise folder is here. So what will happen in practical terms is that when you're writing code within the standard assets scripts, you'll start to get AK sound engine cannot exist in this context errors. The reason is that Unity's trying to find reference to AK sound engine, and it can't, because technically it would have built that standard asset before it even understands that there is integration directly to Wwise and that the AK sound engine is a valid function. So as I say, what you need to do is just make sure that you move those standard assets outside of the standard assets folder and into the root level, and you may need to make a couple of changes within the script to do that. I made a couple myself, but I'll put a reference, I'll put a link in the description of the video that goes into a bit more detail. But ultimately, you just have to be aware that there's a compilation order for scripts within Unity, and standard assets is pretty much always the first one that's compiled. The only other thing I'd mention as well is that you are going to create standalone scripts, and we will be, then good housekeeping is probably to keep it in a standalone scripts folder, which is what I've done here. So I've got a couple of scripts that are very game specific that I've created, and also anything to do with Wwise I've put in here. So you see here's something to do with car Doppler, bullet time transition, third person sounds. These are all scripts that we're actually going to go ahead and explore in the next few videos, but I've stored them in a separate folder just for ease of access, just to split everything up. So that's it for Unity. What we're going to do now is go ahead and jump into the Wwise project itself. So here we are in Wwise. I'm going to go ahead and load up the project itself. Again, we're using the Wwise file within the Wwise demo scene project as the basis. Much of the setup has been done here already for us, so it makes sense to go ahead and use that file as a template. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the concept of Wwise and some of the areas within it and some of the fundamentals within it. I'm assuming there's some prior knowledge here. There's lots of resources around already to get you up and running on this. So I'll put a few links in the description here to some of the sort of more basic elements of Wwise. But the aim of this series here is to show you how we bring those concepts together in a practical, real life example. So that being the case, let's explore the basic setup of what we'll be doing. So we'll start with the actor mixer hierarchy here on the left. The easiest way of organizing, I found, is to keep work units for each of the two key areas within Wwise, so audio and events. So you can see we've got here, it's split up by the videos that we'll be going through. So I've got one for the character demo, which is the next video we'll be doing, one for bullet time later on, environment, and this is in the audio tab. We jump over onto events. You can see I've done the exact same thing in grouping those together. You can go further. You can split them up in switches and in states and game parameters. I haven't done in this example because we haven't got so many that we would need to, but it's worth bearing in mind that you can. There's 4 key layouts we'll be using throughout. This is the main one, which is the designer. We've also got the profiler view. Once we've integrated the mechanic that we're dealing with in the specific video, I'll jump over to the profile and we can see what's going on behind the scenes. So we'll come here at the end of each of the videos. The SoundBank layout, which we'll come on to in a second, which is actually the way of wrapping and exporting these sounds over into Unity. And then we've got the mixer window, which ultimately is how we test out the examples and the mechanics of what we're doing before we export it over to Unity. So I'm going to jump back onto the SoundBank layout. So in the same way that we've got work units for actor mixer and our events hierarchy, we have individual sound banks that wrap all of these together as well. So again, we've got a bullet time one, character, environment, lighting, and vehicles. In the Soundbite Editor, if I click on character, for example, what I've gone ahead and done is pointed the SoundBank towards the same actor mixer work unit. So you can see here, actor mixer hierarchy, character demo. So what I've done is I've literally just grabbed that one and dragged it over here. By default, all of the events and sound effects files that are referenced by the work units are included. So this event structures and media here, as long as that's ticked, then you don't need to drag the events work unit over as well. You just need to include the actor mixer hierarchy. I found this is the simplest way of making sure each sound bank has the correct files and the events in. Unity will give you a clear error where it's trying to reference a sound bank that hasn't been exported or loaded correctly anyway, so that should be fairly clear if there are any issues. Generating SoundBank files in the right location can sometimes be a bit of a case of trial and error. So when you're in user settings, you have the ability to override where the default project SoundBank paths go to. So you just tick that and then you can choose for each platform where you want that to go. If I load up how we currently have it set up in my project, ultimately it goes to the generated SoundBanks folder under the Wwise project folder. So you can see all the different areas of Wwise here, and it generates it here. And I found that the Wwise demo scene that we're using as the backbone quite clearly finds the sounds here. So there shouldn't be any need to change that. However, I found when I've compiled the executable build, I found that Unity was actually reading it from a different folder. It was reading it from assets, streaming assets, audio, and here generated SoundBanks. And again, the format is exactly the same, it's just a different folder. Again, I never managed to find a way to get them to read them from the same. I don't think it matters too much. You just have to remember that when you build a SoundBank, that you build it both in both locations, one for when you're testing out in the Unity testing environment, and one for when you actually go ahead and build it. So all you need to do is make sure that you've got the correct platforms and languages ticked. So in my case, Mac, English US, I'll go ahead and tick Windows as well, and go ahead, make sure that I haven't got the SoundBanks overridden. I haven't. and I just hit generate, and that'll go ahead and that'll wrap all of the work units and all the sound banks together, and generate that into a .bnk folder in the folder you specify. So that's it for this video. That was just a bit of an overview of how to set things up. If you wanted to follow along with the next few videos, then this is the way to do it. Likewise, if you're getting up and running with your own demo, then hopefully that's giving you a taste of what you need to bear in mind. But in the next video, I'll be showing how we create sound for a third-person character model. So some of the footsteps, the jump sounds, and the way we can affect those footsteps based on materials and that sort of thing. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for now.